So our last speaker hails from the beautiful Lakes District in the northern UK. Now he's actually a published author, so you can get his book online. It's called The Shepherd's Life, and of course it's an international bestseller. He's got 112,000 followers on Twitter, so I was a bit sneaky. I took a photo of him out the back, tagged him, and hopefully I might be able to get linked in with his 112,000 Twitter followers. So, ladies and gentlemen, to bring us home for LambEx, please welcome to the stage James Rebanks.
Thank you. Thank you. How are you all doing? You good? Yeah? Hasn't it been an amazing couple of days? I'm absolutely blown away. I've been alternating between, at times, feeling like a dinosaur, like I'm a visitor from the old-fashioned, inefficient farming past, and then occasionally feeling like, oh, maybe we do some things okay. So my real low moment yesterday was when it's Tim Leeming, isn't it? Tim was on the stage yesterday and he put up his slide that was historic bullshit. And I was a little worried. Sorry, I should have had the clicker as well, forgive me. So when Tim put up his slide that said historic bullshit, I thought, oh God, I would break Tim if I brought him to England and showed him how we farm. In fact, I might try it. Tim, if you'd like to come to England, you're more than welcome. I'll come and show you around. But there's, So about a few months ago when I was asked to do this, I was a little bit nervous. I'm a keen lover of sport, and I know there's a fantastic rivalry between us and you. It goes back a very long time. There's a lot of great banter, which was happening at the dinner last night. So I said to one of my friends when we were shearing sheep about a week ago, what should I talk to these Australian farmers about? He said, just put up a picture of Johnny Wilkinson kicking that drop goal in 2003. But I don't have to, because it's seared on your brains, isn't it? Sorry. This is a terrible way for an Englishman to start a presentation. There's lots of things went the other way, so let's not worry too much about that. I then said to my wife, I said, Helen, what should I talk to these people about? Because Helen's more intelligent than me. She said, for God's sake, don't tell them how to farm. Okay? And I make a point of doing that. I'm not often asked to speak to farmers. Really, my thing is talking to the public. That's maybe what I can shed some light on here. I was brought up in a family where my father would have kicked my backside if I told anybody else how to farm. We just don't know enough on our place to tell you how to do many of the things that you're going to do. My wife understood exactly what I should probably talk to you about. She said I should talk to you about what I normally talk about, which is sheep. Helen's sick of listening to me talking about sheep. So last try, I tried my son Isaac, who's 6 years old. I said, what should I talk about? He said, just show them pictures of show them pictures of silly sheep. Doing silly things. So, in all seriousness, I'm not, unlike almost every other speaker that's been on this stage, I'm not an expert on any particular piece of agriculture. I can't remember the last time I learnt more about sheep farming in a couple of days than the last 2 days. I mean that seriously. From the New Zealand guy talking about forage before breakfast yesterday to, was it Dean that was talking earlier about how the sheep grazed with the French shepherd and what that means and how they have to eat different things, to science on how many mouthfuls sheep take in a day, to thinking about how we manage our pastures. Lots of it doesn't translate to my landscape, for reasons that I'll explain, but some of it does. I'm going home with my head spinning about ways that even in our old-fashioned, fairly fixed system, I can change things, so I can only imagine how excited you are. And actually, I can't help myself. It isn't really my job. I think we should put our hands together for the people who organise this, because it's been extraordinary, hasn't it? Yeah. And a quick thank you, because those people brought me over here, and I appreciate that. So thank you to everybody that made it possible for me to be here. So where do we farm? We farm right in the northwest of England. So from the hills behind my house, I look into Scotland. Yeah. It's the most loved bit of England. Okay? Just became a World Heritage Site. It's a highly, highly loved, an iconic piece of landscape. It's probably the piece of landscape that people in the English-speaking world or the English-reading world love the most. Put your hands up if you've been to the English Lake District. Yeah, it means a lot to you as well, doesn't it? I live in this landscape that not only means a lot to us, it means a lot to people like you as well. What can you see immediately about how efficient that would be compared to some of your farmland? Yeah. Polite titter of laughter. I'm not going to be competing with Tim anytime soon in terms of scale and efficiency. But that doesn't stop me admiring what he does or what you do or learning from it. That's what my people look like. That's actually what my grandfather looked like. One of those guys looks very like my grandfather. So it's a sheep farming landscape. The single most amazing thing about our landscape, and it makes the hair stand up on my neck even now, is the sheep that I take to the mountain are genetically the same sheep that went to the mountain every year 1,000 years ago, and the historians think they're the same sheep that went 4,500 years ago. There is no genetic break in these sheep going back at least 1,000, maybe 4,500 years. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it efficient or great, but it does make it interesting. You think, when I take those sheep back to the mountains, I think, every goddamn year for 4,500 years, somebody did what I did. And that can trap you sometimes. It can trap you in historic bullshit, or it can be important in its own way. It can be beautiful, it can be interesting, it can give your life a certain kind of meaning. It's also a really tough landscape. So that's me in March this year. It's a landscape with truly terrible weather for sheep. Terrible weather. So we had, starting last July, we had about 6 or 7 or 8 months worth of rain last winter. Too much, to the point where it's starting to affect the sheep. And then, joy oh joy, last spring we got 3 months of blizzards and cold and snow. And I thought our sheep were indestructible, and last spring taught me a lesson, which is that they're not. There's a point that any sheep, no matter how they're bred for whatever system, can't go beyond it. And our sheep got right to the edge of that. It was the first time in my farming life, and I farmed my whole life, but I've been responsible for everything for the last 5 years. It was the first time in my farming life where you're doing the best you can and it isn't good enough. And I think you all know that from drought and other things. There's a moment where you feel sick to the bottom of your stomach because you've used all your moves. And I got to that point this spring. So everything we do in that landscape, the sheep have to be super, super tough. That's my sheep. Do you ever get any snow here? Silly question. So number one requirement on my farm to farm sheep is the sheep have to be able to stand that stuff. And most breeds of sheep in the world can't stand that stuff. It kills them. Kills them stone dead. And most of the innovations we've tried in the past where we've tried to bring new genetics in fail because they can't pass that test. The people that brought the Celts that bred these sheep originally in this landscape, through trial and error, through death as a really harsh discipline, ended up with these sheep that can put up with more than most sheep. They're incredibly tough. That's what we get most of the time. The snow looks prettiest, but the truth is we get a lot of wet, snotty weather, and that's my father moving some sheep across the moor where we live. So who am I? What am I about? Why am I on the other side of the world? Well, the straight answer is I'm a farmer. So the last couple of days I got to speak to dozens and dozens of you over drinks or standing looking at the sheep. And in many ways I'm just like you. I get up in the morning and I've got a piece of land to look after, and I've got work to do, and I've got people I'm responsible for, and I've got debts to pay. By the way, one of my highlights of this conference was listening to Clayton. Well done, Clayton. Because everybody else was great, but Clayton told us about the truth, isn't it? You borrow a lot of money, you stick your neck out. It's hard work. You fail a bit sometimes. Then you have to get up again and try again and do it another way. I loved that. It made me really feel how close we were, what I am to what you are. There's other moments where I was absolutely terrified that I'm trying to compete with you. So I'm a historic farmer in the mountains in the north of England. We breed these sheep, primarily this breed of sheep called Herdwicks, that's super tough. Tim had another slide, didn't he, about rosettes, but never mind, let's pretend it's good. It's become my bête noire, haven't you, Tim? Sorry. So we're very proud to breed these sheep. The basis of breeding those sheep is that toughness and that practicality, but as in any other thing, there's pride. So when people have done things for 1,000 years in one place, or they've done it 4,500 years, you end up with these sort of layers and layers of culture and tradition. Sometimes it holds you back, sometimes it makes life richer. So these are the sheep that we breed. But I'm also a writer, and that's a funny combination, isn't it? I don't recommend it to most of you if you're really busy on a farm. It's a bad combination. That's what you look like if your mum takes you to a bookshop on the day that your dad's book comes out, and she says, "Look impressed." That's my son Isaac, who at the time was maybe 3 or 4. He's now 6. and I don't think he knows what an impressed face looks like. My eldest daughter, Molly, who's 12, just pretends flat out I didn't write a book. It's too embarrassing to consider. And her school is studying it in English at the moment, and that's just about the most mortifying thing that can happen to a 12-year-old. But the truth is, I was a kid that bummed out of school. I was the rough around the edges kid who couldn't sit still in the class at school, wanted to get the hell out and go and work on the farm with his dad and his granddad, didn't listen to a damn thing anybody told me at school, which isn't good. I know there's little Maddie somewhere in here today. Maddie, be good at school and do not do what I did, okay? School's a good idea, we all know that, but I didn't know that when I was 15, so I bummed out of school, and I had an unusual story, which I tell in the book, which is, as our farm began to go broke in the 1990s, and I began to fall out with my father. By the way, who struggles with the rest of the family on the farm? Hands up. There's a family over there where nobody dare put their hand up. It's okay, you can admit it. As we struggled to make money, I looked around me, I thought, we're not the future of this farming. I actually came when I was 20 to Australia. I worked over in New South Wales and Victoria on farms. I went home terrified. What do you do if this is your farming life, if it's old-fashioned and you can't compete? What do you do? My 20-year-old answer was to get out, to sort of listen to the economists. I have to get some other skills. I have to do something else to earn money. So as well as carrying on loving our farm, I started to do other things. I went back to night classes, and I had an amazing teacher, and he said, why don't you apply to go to Oxford University? And I said, are you mad? I've got no exams. And he said, no, I think you could do this with some help. And persuaded me to do it, and I got into Oxford University when I was in my mid-20s, and I left the farm for a few years to go and do that. When I say left the farm, the best thing about going to university in Britain is that you're never far from home, and they only want to see you 2 or 3 hours a week. So I was the most unusual student ever. I kept going back to do the shepherding, and then coming back for the contact time with the professors. So I've had this odd life, and I've done other things outside of farming, and my real passion is talking to the public. The same word keeps coming up over and over again in the last 2 days. It's trust, isn't it? Trust, if we lose the trust of the public. And whilst I'm not the greatest innovator that there's been on this stage in terms of farming, I can do things to talk to the public. So I wrote that book. It's been translated into something like 20 languages, just came out in China last week. And I have this Twitter account with 112,000 followers, and I talk to the public. That's what I do. I'm not talking to farmers. Some of my farming friends find it annoying that I won't turn to one side and talk to them. I'm just blunt. I'm not in it for that. I can go to the pub to talk to farmers. What I really want to do is to talk to the public, try and keep that conversation going. I find it interesting. That's Isaac doing more farming stuff. Do you think he looks like a farmer at the moment? I think he looks a bit skeptical. And that's actually his sheep having 2 lambs. And there's a fantastic clip that I put on Twitter. He actually pulled those lambs out. And as he pulled them out, I didn't tell him to, he put this slimy hand in the air and he went, yeah! I think it was quite a big deal for him. That's my dad. What did I really write a book for? I wanted to talk to the public, but I wanted to do something else, which is my heroes are the people that don't usually make it into books. So I grew up with farm workers, and I grew up with farmers that you never heard on a stage talking. Just people that got up every morning, did their work, paid their bills, looked after their families, sort of modest, hard-working people. And I wrote about them in the book. I said they're the nobodies. And the history of a lot of farmland is the history of the nobodies. And I wanted to write a book that celebrated those people, that said, look, they're dignified and they're hardworking and they're good people and they have good values and I respect them. And I had no idea whether the rest of the world would like that or not, but it turns out they do. Do you know why? Because most people are bred from nobodies. Whether you're in a city or a town, usually your dad or your granddad, they took the rubbish or they built shelves in somebody's house or they cleaned things up or they drove taxis. People respect people at work. And actually, people respect farmers. I didn't used to think they did. But when you find yourself in roomfuls of non-farmers around the world, you find that there's a huge appetite to know more about farming, and there's a really inbuilt thing to like farmers. So this took me a while to realize, but I got asked to do a talk in Manhattan. I'm not a Manhattan kind of guy, but I got asked to do a talk in Manhattan in New York, and there was a queue full of people, and it was every kind of person that you could imagine, of every race, color, sex, blah, blah, blah. Do you know what every single person in Manhattan did? They came to tell me that their grandfather was a farmer, or their dad was a farmer, and this was people from Thailand and Mexico and all over the world. Everybody had a farming story, and it was a moment where I opened my eyes and thought, hang on a minute, They want to like us because they were us, and they've lost that. They've got that disconnect. That's the thing that happened, isn't it? We became so specialized that we ended up over there, a tiny number of us, and they ended up over there, and we have this huge gulf between us where we don't really understand each other very well anymore. So I wrote this book about my dad. The sad part of that was I was halfway through writing the book, and my dad got cancer, and I knew he was going to die. And I tell you, if you ever write a book about somebody that you love that's going to die, it's really awkward. What am I going to say? Like, do I have to be nice about him because he's going to die? Because he's been a pain in the ass for the previous 15 years. You know, it's like, I love you, Dad, but can I tell the truth? So what did I do? I trod that line as well as I could. I tried to be respectful, but I tried to tell the truth about the fights we had when I was 20 years old and the things I didn't agree with him over that period, because he wasn't always right. I wasn't always right either. It took me a while to realize that. But and I wrote this book, and I put it out there, and about 3 weeks before he died, he got to read a proof of the book before it was published. And I left it at the house. I've never been as nervous in my life. Like, it's probably the last thing I ever get to say to my dad. Is he going to like this? Is he going to be hurt? Is he going to think I've portrayed him in a good way? So I left this book, and really, sorry, I'm going to make myself cry now, but the thing I really want is my dad to like it, yeah? So I left it in the house. I go back a couple of days later, and I said to my mum, what happened? And she said, he cried all the way through it. Yeah? And I said, oh, God, does that mean he hates it? She said, no, I don't think so, but you'll have to ask him. So I asked my dad. He said, it's okay. So I tried my sister Jane, who I knew had had a conversation with him about it. I said, Jane, you're my last chance. Does he like the book or not? And she said, yeah, he said to me that he's really surprised that he came out with this book as a fucking legend. And I apologize for dropping an F-bomb, but serious point, I know we're here to talk about farming, but we work hard, don't we, on the farm, right? We work hard, we're trying to do things, we're trying to change things, and it isn't easy, and we have rows, and you want that, and I want that. Do you know what? That stuff actually isn't the most important thing. The thing is, I sound like Oprah Winfrey, but be nice, yeah? Just tell your dad, no matter how grumpy he is, no matter how oddly he might look back at you, put your hand on his shoulder or give him a cuddle one day, tell him you love him, because it's the best bloody thing I ever did. Because when my dad died, there was nothing else I needed to say. I'd written him a 200-page letter, yeah? And it was an absolute privilege to have done that. When he died, I said to him, are we okay? And he said, yeah. And that was good enough for me. We're all right, we've come through that stuff. So you don't want to see an English farmer cry for half an hour, so let's change the subject. So I write books, I wrote about my family. I also really, really care about birds and wildlife and stuff like that. So Nathan said a lot of great things in the last half an hour. But he's right, I don't want to be one of those people saying sorry. And I'm actually not one of those people that's so bullish that I can just do my thing even if other people don't like it. It bothers me if people don't like what I'm doing. Actually, I think it bothers most farmers if people don't like what you're doing. We're actually quite sensitive, whether we admit it or not. So the big debate in the UK at the moment is about what happened to wildlife in the English countryside. I don't know whether you have the same thing here, but I think it will come in one form or another. Every single event, every single talk, every single discussion in a newspaper in the UK is, what did farmers do to the birds, to the butterflies, to the insects? Where did it go? And what did these crazy people do to trash everything? So the social license, the thing that we've been talking about for the last couple of days, the way that we have to restore that in the UK is to talk about that, to say, what is it we're doing in fields? Can we not do some of those things? Can we do other things to keep birds and insects in our fields? And the big problem is that almost every inch of England, every inch of the UK is farmed. Okay, why is that a problem? Well, to me as a kid, that wasn't a problem. But if you listen to the ecologists, what's happening is, as we become better at what we do, we make parcels of land more sterile. If we do that in a patchwork, it maybe doesn't have a terribly negative effect. But if we do it at whole landscape scales, we start to have profound impacts on the things that the public care about. And in the UK, that's reached a real sort of boiling point where you can't talk about farming without it being quite toxic. And I take part in that discussion. And it's interesting that hasn't happened here, or that isn't a major topic of conversation over the last couple of days. If I could give you one piece of information, maybe only one of you will listen to me on this, but if you want to be ready for 20 years' time, make friends with an ecologist. Yeah? Invite them to your farm, or somebody from your university, get them to come. Say, What is it we're doing right? What is it we're doing wrong? What are we making worse? Just tell me. You don't have to make me feel good, just tell me. It's the best single thing you could do, because I can have this debate with ecologists now because I've done that. I've had ecologists out to do plant surveys, insect surveys, soil surveys, carbon audits, to have a conversation about farming in the UK at the moment. We've had to go through this revolution of knowing loads of stuff which you probably don't want to be bothered with because you're too busy doing your day job. But it's maybe coming, and some of you should start thinking about it. Okay, you saw the maps that Nathan put up before. I nearly had a tear out there before. One of the dots, actually two of the dots on that maps were our farms. All of our livestock was wiped out in 2001 on both farms. We got foot and mouth disease. It is absolutely impossible to find in sheep. I've done hours and hours and hours of turning sheep up to look for lesions in their feet, which look just like foot rot, so you can't bloody well tell. And then our cattle got it, and you can't tell because the skin starts slipping out of their mouths, and it's horrid, absolutely horrid. So keep that crap out of your country. And if you need EIDs or other things to do that and traceability, do it. He's right. I'm not, I also spent a lot of time working in historic farmed landscapes around the world. So one of the jobs I did off the farm before I went home was I used to get the job of going to these amazing historic farmed landscapes where people are really poor, where they're getting out-competed by modern agriculture, and to try to work out how those people could survive doing those things because people want them to. And that was fascinating, and it changed my view of what farming is. So 80, maybe 90% of the farmers on Earth are not going to win the battle to be the most efficient, the most productive, the most high quality. And that's an issue, isn't it? Do we want all those people to leave their land and come to live where we live? I'm not sure we do in the round. So do we all have a kind of interest in them staying in those places? Maybe, and helping them to do so. So context is really, to me, context is everything about how we farm. We're very similar, but we're also very, very different. I think UK public opinion and our social license is completely different from yours. Where you do things, what you do, when, why, how, all these things really, really matter. And the kind of land you had really, really matters as well. That's the kind of land that we're in. I can't crop. I can't change anything, for the most part, in terms of the land structure. Even the walls and the field sizes are protected by legislation. Nobody wants to see them disappear. So I have to tell a very different story. I either have to disappear as a farmer, or I have to tell a better story than you about how people might want to spend twice as much on my lamb as yours. I'm necessarily niche. I can't go toe-to-toe in your markets. A lot of our land is common land on the fells. I don't know if you know what common land is, but common land's really simple in a nutshell. Aristocratic feudal overlords used to own the mountains of England. And they said to people like me, you can put a certain number of sheep on those mountains if you pay the rent. Do you know what the rent was? Pick up a pitchfork or a spear and go and fight the Scots every 5 or 10 years. Okay? And if you look at the history, if you ever bother to read about the history of the battles between the English and the Scots, the armies on both sides were recruited in the same way, and most of the battles end in people running away. Do you want to die for your landlord that you don't give a toss about? No. So you waved your spears a bit, pretended to be brave, and then you looked at the other lot and went, and ran away. So we're really squatters that stayed on the land, and we earned the legal rights to put a certain number of sheep on the mountain in a certain way. It's dog and stick country, we would call it in England. Yeah, it's not very mechanized. I do use EID. All of our sheep are EID tagged, and we use the scanners, and they're individually numbered, and we get individual reports back from the abattoir, which is one of the few areas I was really surprised that you didn't get that. But it's dog country, sheep and dog country. To gather our mountain takes 10 different farmers and 25 dogs 2 days. So it's not big by Australian standards, but by English standards, it's big expanse of land with a low intensity of sheep on it. That's my dog Tan. I lost him on that mountain about 2 weeks ago. And just to give you an idea how rough it is, I lost him for 3 days. And it was very, very hot. I thought either he's dropped dead with heat exhaustion, which would have been a tragedy to me because he's the best dog I've ever had, or he's got confused and he's run off the mountain in the wrong way and he'll turn up. Didn't turn up. And then a friend of mine went with some binoculars and found him on one of the cliffs. It's like a vertical cliff. And we had to call in the mountain rescue to come and get him. And so we've got a really odd kind of farming. And I realized last week how odd it was when a man was dangling himself off a cliff on a rope to get my sheepdog back. I was like, and all I could think was, Christ, don't die, mate. Don't die. Don't die. Okay, so the land is an interplay between the valley bottoms, which are the productive bit, and the mountains, which grow grass only in summer from April to November. And the basic pattern of my farming is the same. It's the same as it was 1,000 years ago. I take my sheep in April back to the mountain with their lambs. I fetch them back down several times a year to clip or drench or whatever, but they're really living on a mountain. And then they come down these lanes and roads that are all maintained with ancient stone walls. Virtual fencing, I don't quite know what to make of that in my context. I was looking at it thinking, I love it, I don't know how to do it, I love it. What does that mean? Oh, I don't know. But seriously, virtual fencing, I think, might revolutionize this. So the battle we have with ecologists is that our sheep are munching stuff that they don't want munched on the open mountain. We're not allowed to put fences on the mountain because of legislation, because they're open spaces. I had a sort of eureka moment earlier today where I thought, hang on a minute, we can put a thing on our phone around the alpine plants, and we can put a circle on our phone around an area of scrub. That might change the game from ecologists and farmers smashing heads into each other to saying, actually, we can live alongside each other, we can deliver the outcomes we want. It becomes a different conversation. I can say, this is how much I want you to pay me to do that, frankly. Yeah? And that's the bottom line. When somebody wants you to not be globally competitive, that's what a conversation becomes like. I want them to like me now. I want to do what they want me to do, and I'm going to push them very hard to pay for it. Okay? Those are the meadows in the valley bottom. This is to tell you how trapped I am by history and by ecosystem, if you like. That meadow has 87 species of grasses and flowering plants in it. Upland hay meadows are one of the rarest habitats in Britain, if not Europe at the moment. 97% of those disappeared since the Second World War. Nobody, absolutely nobody, wants me to put nitrogen on that meadow. Okay? It kills it. So I can't do most of the things that you do as a farmer to be more productive. Can't do it anymore. Instead, I'm having to have a conversation with the people that care about those things, saying, well, I can look after it, but you're going to have to help me out here. You can't leave me in the 18th century and not earning enough money. You can't have 1940s wildlife at 2018 prices for sheep. Yeah? You have to have a different conversation with the public. I'm running out of time, so I better go quicker. We have this really weird system whereby the sheep are living on the common ground, so to tell them apart, we have the ear notches in the sheep for the individual flocks. I loved meeting the merinos earlier because they have the ear notches in, so you have some of those things. And we have a book that tells you whose sheep are whose. And we have this really old system whereby we see who's got the best sheep. We meet up. So everybody on the mountains around a certain valley is entitled to go to what's called a shepherd's meet, and we compete by eye. It is the rosette thing. But it's part of our sort of social system and cultural system, and we take great pride in it. And that's my daughter Molly, who doesn't reckon much of her dad being an author, but does quite like her dad winning first prize rosettes. And that's actually her sheep. It was the first sheep she ever bred, and she won our local show, and it took me about 20 years to do that. I was like, what? She's very, very proud of what we do, and she's smart. And she may not be a farmer, that's okay. She may go and do something else. But I've always said to my wife that if they learn about what we do and they have a pride in it and a knowledge about it, I don't mind what they do. I'll back them all the way to do other things. So what do we farm? We farm sheep. That's one of the stud rams or stock-ups, as we would call them, that I'm going to sell in about a month's time. And I'm hoping that one in particular is worth quite a bit of money. So they used to be a wool sheep. They're increasingly being bred for carcass. So I'm trying to breed the super toughest sheep on the planet with carcass. So it brings a lamb with a lot of good meat on it off the fell in November. So fast growing, it matters to us just like it matters to you. We also have a few cattle. The cattle are actually not there to be cattle. They're there for conservation grazing. So when those people want to pay me to look after certain habitats in certain ways, it turns out that cattle are much better for that in our habitats than sheep. So we've had to go back to keeping cattle that don't make money to earn money from growing scrub and things like that. Yeah, welcome to my world. It gets a little bit complicated. So what do we produce? It's a while since I've done this, but just running you through this really quickly. Wool used to be how we made our living. Don't anymore. My wool check doesn't cover a third of the shearing cost or clipping cost. Actually, I don't pay to clip. I clip them myself. But meat is the end result of what that breed of sheep are ultimately for now. But I realized a long time ago that at the scale I've got, I can't produce enough of that to make a living. So we went up the value chain in terms of being a specialist, sort of elite breeding program, stud flock. That's what we do. I sell breeding females, breeding males. Another thing I do that small farmers do in our country now is the big farmers haven't got the time to train sheepdogs properly, so I breed and train sheepdogs and sell them to other people. And then the stuff at the back, stuff at the bottom would have baffled my grandfather. His mind would have been blown. But I'm now increasingly doing and getting paid to do stuff the public say they want. Yeah? I'm not sure whether to wish this ever happens to you or not. Some of you will be going, we've discovered something recently is that people want to come to farms, people want to experience it. And where we live has a £50 million farming economy and a £2.2 billion tourism economy. Most of the opportunities for me to earn money from my land are probably going to be in tourism. And people, all of that stuff that we've been talking about people want to know about farms, I'm the guy and my friends are the guys trying to work out, with our wives and other partners, trying to work out how we do that. How do we persuade people to pay to come and see these things, to care about them? And it's a different game to you guys. So that lady in the background is Beatrix Potter. I'm sure many of you grew up with Beatrix Potter's books. She bought many of the farms in the valleys where we live, and she left them to a conservation charity called the National Trust, and she said they have to be farmed in a certain way. I don't think Tim would like it. It's not a tendency some of you would want. But if you live in our world and you do what I do, you can do what we do, you can do it. And yeah, bear with me. So the thing about ecology, I would get seriously, some of you think about it, get ecologists on your farm, start to think about it. Have like a little focus group or something. Start to think about what you're going to be attacked for. I know you did things like land care in the past. It may be that you have enough outback left or you're managing it all great. I don't know. But maybe have a think about that for the future. We've started to do other things like wilding our rivers. Yeah? So my ancestors put an inordinate amount of effort into straightening rivers to drain fields properly. Turns out that's bad. Yeah. Sorry to everybody over 50 who thinks that's bullshit. To stop the flooding of our local city, they're going upstream and they're rewiggling and rewilding all of the rivers. And it makes no sense at all to hit farmers historically, but we're having to get our heads around it, and it's something that they want to pay for. And we also do school visits to the farm. We invite people onto the farm. So just to finish off, I want to tell you really, really quickly, the thing I've learned from my journey is people want to like farmers, but we've just got to be really, really careful with it. It's that thing about trust, isn't it? And the social license. To build an audience takes time. And I think you have to use that. I think you have to tell them about your day-to-day reality, not preach at them. The classic thing farmers do is they preach on social media. I want to tell you what I think. No, don't do that. Just tell them what you're doing today. Build it up like that. I have an 80-20 rule, which is a little bit cynical, which is if the world wants cute dogs and cute lambs, I'll give the world cute lambs and cute puppies 80% of the time. And when I really need to pull the trigger because there's something I care about and I want their attention, I use the other 20% of the time to campaign about the things I care about. A little cynical, maybe, but that's how the world works. The other thing is, I discovered this on social media. So I have 112,000 followers on Twitter. I thought I was talking to the public. It turns out there's two other groups of people I was talking to without realizing it. One is journalists. So there's somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000 journalists follow me on Twitter around the world. And I now see them writing stuff in newspapers that's nothing to do with me, never quoted me, but they sound a bit like me sometimes. They've understood the thing I was trying to explain over the previous 5 years. You're doing a job of, I don't call it education. I think Nathan's right not to call it education. But you're teaching other people how to think about a thing properly. And then they go off and do the work for you quite often. And then politicians. So I have an ongoing exchange of sorts with our agriculture minister. I try not to tell him that I think he's nuts half the time, but that's you can speak to those kind of people as well. If you build up a body of trust and they think everybody else is looking, they come and look and they want to know what you think about things. Next thing is listen. That's the tough bit, isn't it? I think if I'm honest, it's particularly tough for you because I'm a kind of cutesy, old world, quaint farmer. I think I've got some advantages over this on you, but maybe a little bit harder. If you're a really big commercial operation, maybe a little bit harder, but listening to what they care about, Nathan's absolutely right. And words matter. So on the front of my book, did it say the sheep producer? No. Did it say the guy from the sheep industry? No. It said the shepherd's life. Why did a publisher, because I didn't give it the name, why did the publisher think that shepherd was a good word? Got any answers? Yeah, it's a nice word. In the public's mind, it's a nice word. And do you know what? When I was sitting in the audience for the last 2 days, I hear you think like an industry, talk like an industry, organize like an industry, and I'm a little bit jealous. I think, Christ, you're good at that. Really, really good at it. And I admire it. I respect it. But when you leave the building, I wouldn't use the word industry. Yeah? Don't talk to the public about it being an industry. Are you trying to prove to them that you're economically important, or are you trying to tug at their heartstrings about what you do? I would talk about being a farmer, and I would talk about the things that you do and the things that you care about and the work that you do. And hell, if you have to use the word shepherd, use the word shepherd. I don't know what the difference between a shepherd and a sheep farmer is, but if the word shepherd works better, use the word shepherd, okay? Next one is being honest and open. This is one of the hardest things. So when I started to tweet, this is how tweeting worked on our farm, right? Me and my dad are walking along with the dogs behind the sheep. My dad starts to talk to a neighbor, and I quickly pull my phone out, take a picture of the sheep, put it back in my pocket, because I'm embarrassed that my dad will think that I'm sharing anything about our farm on social media. Our family doesn't share things with other people. We don't tell people. We don't invite people in beyond the farm gate. We're the people that just keep it to ourselves, because those people are lunatics. Yeah? Some people are nodding, so that will be your default setting for some of you. But I've learned that that's the wrong way. But it's tricky, because when you share your world, you've got to be careful. Do I show them dead sheep? Do I show them a lamb that I skinned to adopt to put on another lamb? Where they're going to hate me? Am I going to end up on the front of a newspaper? I try to go as far down that route of telling them the truth as I can, because I think otherwise we're all going to end up as infants. Yeah? I think we we treat people like children too much. I think we have to share the good and the bad, and we have to ride that out. Frankly, this is what I really think, if you're going to do mulesing and you're going to do live export, and you have to do those things, then I think you probably have to show and talk about it. You can't pretend it's not going to happen, because they're going to find it anyway. If you're not going to do those things because you value public opinion more than that, and you're going to find a way not to do it, then you go down that route and you celebrate that. But you can't hide anything anymore. The hiding days have gone. Everybody else is right about that. So I'm going to stop talking. I hope that's been useful to you. I would recommend that the last thing I would say is don't all try and do this. If you're grumpy and you don't like the public, this isn't for you. But some of you will be really good at it, and it might not be who you think it is. It might not be the really loud guy. It might be the really quiet farmer's wife, or it might be the younger brother or sister who like fiddling on the computer but you didn't think were very farmy. It might be them that are your salvation in terms of public relations. So don't always let the loud guys do it, right? I'm going to stop. It's been an absolute privilege to come and talk to you. I've learned so much. I'm going to try and take as much back as I possibly can to the farm. I'm going to think about how we can beat you with better story and better technology after the last couple of days. And I hope to speak to some of you later. It's been an absolute treat. Thank you very much.